Welcome back. You're watching Channel 1 Liverpool with me, Rifat Malik. Channel 1 Tobruk. Channel 1 Albert Dock. Time to take a look at the headlines now.
It's 10 to 11, I'm Rifat Malik. 9 o'clock, I'm Rifat Malik.
Christopher Older was found dead. All political campaigning has stopped. Stand head to head with those who feel it's morally indefensible. This is it, folks. My brief 2 weeks of movie show stardom has come to an end. The film director Steven Spielberg to be given an honorary knighthood.
Hello and welcome to the Muslim Viewpoint, a new video podcast series powered by American Muslim Today. Hello and welcome to Muslim Viewpoint, a new podcast series powered by American Muslim Today. I'm your host, Rifat Malik, and today we are continuing our Get Out the Vote series. Our guest is Dr. Vanessa Enoch from Ohio. She is the Democratic candidate for Congress in the state's 8th Congressional District, and she is running against the incumbent Warren Davidson. Dr. Enoch is a public policy and business consultant and has a PhD in public policy and social change. She has worked as a college professor and a department chair and dean of students for nearly 18 years. So, Dr. Enoch, Vice President Kamala Harris is likely to be confirmed as Biden's replacement to become the Democratic presidential nominee and is polling at only 1% ahead of a Republican nominee, former President Trump, meaning November will be a tight race. What issues do you think Ohio voters will be swayed by, as they will be heavily targeted because you are in a swing state?
I think there are several issues that resonate with the voters here. Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, tends to do better on those issues among our voters in the 8th Congressional District, and that is women's reproductive freedom, as well as jobs and economic development. Although President Biden has done a phenomenal job in terms of stimulating the economy, I think that some of the contentious issues like the war between Israel and Palestine tend to turn a lot of voters off from Biden. And so I'm believing that Vice President Harris is going to do a spectacular job as it relates to those voters, bringing young voters to the polls, as well as voters who traditionally have stayed away from the polls because they don't like either candidate. So I think that kind of resolves those issues. And so I'm looking forward to a very spirited race this time around.
Well, you mentioned the situation in Gaza right now, and I believe you've been openly critical of the actions of Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, as you have been of Russian President Vladimir Putin regarding his invasion of Ukraine. Do you think your party and Vice President Harris needs to immediately stop military aid to Israel, which we know has been used in the killing of thousands of innocent Palestinian civilians?
Yeah, I think so. I think there is a delicate balance that Congress is taking a look at in terms of ensuring that we continue to stabilize countries there and that we are taking into consideration humanitarian issues in Gaza as well. So, as it relates to humanitarian aid, I think Netanyahu has committed atrocious war crimes in Palestine. We're looking at a genocide unlike anything I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I think we need to use leverage and the tools that we have as a nation to ensure that war does not continue, for sure.
Had you been in Congress, would you have been present at the address that Netanyahu recently made to Congress?
I likely would have been one of the ones who would have boycotted. I think it was a terrible idea to have him come and to speak before Congress. We have a Republican Congress that is contentious at best. And some of the choices that Congress has made has been very antithetical to the freedoms that we've believed in, enjoyed, and respected here in this country. So I think that I would have been one of the ones who would have stayed away from that address. Absolutely.
On the same issue, as a university administrator of many years, you will of course have witnessed the nationwide protests against the actions of Israel and the US government's complicity. Do you believe these largely peaceful protests in universities across the US and in other parts of the world should have been violently quelled, as so many were?
Absolutely not. I think many people have forgotten that we have a constitution that affords us freedom of speech in this country. And those students were exercising their constitutional right to freedom of speech, and to violently remove them was definitely not reflective of our values in this country. And so I applaud the students who stood up and the students who continue to fight. They are leading an effort that all of us should be proud of as Americans, and to violently remove them or remove them at all is, quite antithetical to our freedoms and our values here in America.
Donald Trump recently told a Christian gathering that they will never have to vote again if he's elected. This created some concern. He denied that comment was meant as any threat to the country's democratic process. But after the violence of January the 6th and the criminal indictments that he faces, can we believe him?
Absolutely not. I think Donald Trump makes a lot of statements that people don't weigh against cultural norms. And when he says things, people pass them off. And we know from his first term in office that when he says those things, he actually means them. So, my grandmother used to say, when somebody shows you who they are, that you should believe them. And Donald Trump has shown us who he is over and over again. And if nothing else, January 6th should have taught us that we cannot ignore anything Donald Trump says. And it is in line with the Project 2025 plan and all of those things that Donald Trump has been threatening over time. Definitely of the mindset that we must take those things serious when he says them, and to prepare for them. We need to be preparing for the things that Donald Trump is saying. He's threatening that we will have an autocracy form of government in this country. And if we're not careful, if we don't get to the polls this year, this November, we may not have a democracy after November 5th.
During a Trump Vance rally in Ohio, State Senator George Lang is recorded to have said that if Republicans lose the election, it's going to take a civil war to save the country. What was your response to that statement?
George Lang, nothing George Lang says has surprised me either. I happen to be a constituent of George Lang's right here in the 8th Congressional District, where J.D. Vance is also from, where John Boehner is also from. So when you think of the worst in Congress, I'm right here in this district battling these demons. I'll call them demons for lack of a better word, every day. And that is why I'm running for office. It is to ensure that people like George Lang, people like J.D. Vance, people like Warren Davidson, who I am running against, don't continue to serve in office uncontested and without proper checks and balances, which is what's happening right now. George Lang has no right to be in office where he has to represent the people of this district, not spewing hatred and violent rhetoric like that. But it is right in line with what Donald Trump has been saying. Donald Trump has articulated that there will be a bloodbath. Heritage Foundation leadership has also threatened a revolutionary war. And I think we should be prepared. And as Americans, whether you are a Republican or a Democrat at this point, I think we need to all be of the mindset that we have to protect our democracy at all costs. And so I advocate for ensuring that everyone is voting blue all the way through, meaning that you are voting Democratic ballot from the top of the ticket to the bottom of the ticket to save our democracy. Because this rhetoric it's happening from the State House to the White House if Donald Trump gets in. And so we have to be mindful of that.
Now, you mentioned the use of inflammatory language and the divisiveness of politics in this country currently. It's believed to have been one of the reasons why there was a recent assassination attempt on former President Trump. The 20-year-old would-be assassin, who was also killed, was revealed to have used an AR-15 rifle. Now, is this the time, in your view, to finally recognize that America needs urgent gun reform so that such weapons weapons which have been used, as you will know, in hundreds of mass shootings throughout the years.
I think the time was last year, the year before, and we are past due for sensible gun legislation in this country. We cannot continue giving families of children who are slaughtered our thoughts and prayers. We cannot continue to put American lives at risk when we leave our homes and go to the grocery store or to church or to a parade or to a concert. It is past due that we pass sensible gun legislation to ensure that weapons of warfare are not in the hands of civilians, and especially at this particular time in history when we have people like George Lang and Donald Trump advocating for violence.
I just want to, my last question, I just wanted to focus on something that you mentioned earlier on, which was women's reproductive rights. Your home state of Ohio made national headlines last year when a 10-year-old girl was raped and had to travel out of state to get an abortion. This was soon after the U.S. Supreme Court had overturned Roe v. Wade. There's been statewide and national legal challenges to this ban on abortions. What do you want to see happen in Ohio and indeed the country in terms of women's right to health care?
First and foremost, we have to remove legislators like my opponent, Warren Davidson, who wants to pass a national abortion ban. When asked how he felt about a 10-year-old who had become pregnant, that 10-year-old, as a result of that rape, he said that he found it hard to believe that someone didn't know that they were pregnant at 6 weeks. And many of us women who are mothers, we know that it's absolutely possible and often the case that we don't know we're pregnant at 6 weeks, let alone a child who has been raped or who has become pregnant at such a young and tender age. I'd like to see us codify the provisions in Roe v. Wade to ensure that our rights and our freedoms are protected, not just abortion rights, but all rights as it relates to our bodily autonomy, such as IVF, our right to use birth control, our rights to control where we travel, where we go. My opponent is interested in passing a national abortion ban to ensure that women's bodies are controlled by the government. He speaks of freedom being a candidate for freedom. Well, he's a candidate for freedom for those individuals who agree with his stances, not for the rest of us. As far as women are concerned, he is a threat to our freedoms. He's a threat to democracy. So I'd like to see him removed. And I'd like to see us codify Roe v. Wade and to elect a Congress who's going to do that for us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Enoch, for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.